Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to today's Planning Committee. This is not a public meeting, but a meeting the public can attend. I'm Councillor Susan Durant, Chair of the Planning Committee. Before we commence, I'd like to outline the domestic arrangements for the meeting. We're not expecting a fire practice today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the building by way of the fire exit through the doors at the rear of the chamber on my right. When you've left the chamber, proceed down the stairway and exit through the emergency exit on the ground floor. If there is anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side on the lift doors to call for assistance. The designated assembly point is in the public square in front of CAS beyond the fountain. I'd like to inform members of the public and press that today's meeting will be audio-visually recorded, and by entering the council chamber, you accept that you will be recorded and your images retained and broadcast by the council on its website and on YouTube. If anyone intends to record or film any part of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting and you only focus on recording those people participating. And please ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent mode. May I remind anyone speaking in the meeting that you will need to press the large red button underneath the microphone and ensure that the light is illuminated, and this will ensure that you are recorded. The meeting is proceeding today on the basis that all members of the committee have read their agenda papers thoroughly and are aware of what they will be considering today. If any member of the committee leave the chamber during consideration of an application, they should ensure they do not take part in the vote on their return, as they will not have heard all the relevant information on that particular item. Thank you. Item 1 is apologies for absence, and we've received apologies from Councillor Amy Dixon and Andy Pickering. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. Item 2 is the exclusion of press and public. There are no exempt items on today's agenda. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please?
Yes, Chair, I have a declaration of interest for the first item on the agenda, so I'll remove myself from the discussions.
Thank you very much for that. If you're ready to fill a form in, thank you. Item 4 are the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 19th of September 2023. Can the minutes be moved as a true and accurate record? Can that be moved? Thank you, Councillor Beach. Is that seconded? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Stapleton. And is that agreed? Thank you. Item 5 is the schedule of applications. Application number 1 is planning application 23/00108/FUL, which is the conversion of existing dwelling with erection of rear extension to create a 7 one-bed HMO units and conversion of a rear outbuilding to create a one-bedroomed apartment at 18 Lifford Road in Wheatley. Matt Ramsey is the planning case officer and will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So this application relates to a proposal to create a house of multiple occupation with 7 one-bed units in Wheatley and conversion of an outbuilding for a standalone apartment. So this is achieved by extending and converting a 5-bedroom house with a 2-storey extension on the rear. This application was deferred on the 19th September for the following reasons: clarification on the number of parking permits allowed for residents, number of permits currently issued in the street, and the assessment of the noise impact of the party wall with number 20. So planning permission is sought for this change, and as well as a house to convert the outbuilding to form a single apartment at the rear. So So that's front of the house. That's see on the site plan, the outbuilding at the rear. No external alterations are proposed to the front elevation of the property, however, and the two-storey extension is proposed on the rear of the building. So you can see the elevations. The shaded part would be the new build. Policy 9 sets out strict criteria in relation to the development of HMOs. The policy states there are concerns around the quality of living for occupants of these dwellings, and proposals for HMOs will only be supported that cover the standards of accommodation, waste storage, and the conversion does not cause harm to the area or amenity of neighbouring residents. There's no provision for off-street parking, and any parking provision will be on-street in the marked bays, which have a daytime 2-hour limit on them. The proposal does not include dedicated parking spaces on site for occupiers. While the policy refers to parking, there's no set standard laid down in terms of minimum provision, and the policy accepts reduced provision if the location is particularly sustainable. So just run through for those who weren't on site visit. So that's the elevation drawings of the outbuilding with the door and windows facing into the yards. The other elevations are blank. The rear, that's the photograph of the rear from the alleyway, and also you can, where the arrow is pointing, you can see this access to the rear garden as well from the alleyway. It's been assessed on the basis that this site is relatively close location to transport links on Beckett Road and Wheatley Hall Road, hospital, doctor surgery, dentists, and nearby shops. Also, it's acknowledged that occupants of this type of accommodation are less likely to have private transport, and I'll come to the matters around permit parking shortly, which members brought up at the last meeting. So on the screen at the moment, you've got the map of the licensed HMOs in the surrounding area. As you see, there's none currently on Lifford Road, so this one would be the first. And for completeness, Policy 9 sets out restrictions on the number of HMOs that can be created in any street. The site is within the Article 4 direction area, so these rules apply to the smaller HMOs that in other areas would not require planning permission. So the rules are that not more than 2 HMOs side by side. You can't sandwich a self-contained house or flat between 2 other HMOs, and you can't have more than 2 HMOs within a run of 20 properties on one side of the road. So on this basis, the conversion of this one would mean that only one other could be created on the same side of the road and would have to be at least 3 doors away from this one. So as you see, the HMO licensing data we've used on the screen to create the map, and so that this proposal is compliant with those elements of Policy 9, and also local and national planning policy promote a housing mix to support a variety of market demand by providing for different types of housing and accommodation. So you also see there's a small number of HMOs located on surrounding streets as shown on the map, so it's not considered to adversely affect the character of the surrounding area as they are spaced quite well apart. So just move on to the floor plans. Environmental Health Officer looked at this in terms of standard of accommodation and also effects on neighbouring properties. The design resulted from that originally proposed by reducing the number of units, which in turn improved the quality and amount of space available. Noise through the party wall can be ameliorated through insulation, and a condition requiring a scheme to be agreed is included in the recommendation. We'd look for a scheme equivalent to meeting the building regulation standard for a new semi-detached house. There are various ways of achieving this, ideally through taking noise readings to assess background noise and then working out what level of insulation might be needed. However, if it's not possible, a fallback would be to use sound block with double layers of plasterboard. This would reduce the footprint of the rooms, however, based on a 2-inch thickness, which I think, having looked at the various specs of boarding that's available, is on the generous side. The maximum loss in space in each room would be no more than 1/5 of 1 square metre in total, which would be a relatively negligible change. So just running through the rest of the plans. So you've got the how the roof level, which is already created, and then the floor plan of the outbuilding. Okay, so right, on to permitting. In the previous meeting, the subject of on-street parking was brought up. There's been clarification from the parking team since my report was compiled. All residents who have a vehicle registered to their home address will be able to apply for a permit. The permit would be valid in the marked bays, not just within the street, but within the wider Wheatley North area, which I've outlined on the map on the screen. The parking team were not able to break down the number of permits already issued in Lifford Road. However, within the wider permitting area, there's 390 permits issued in the scheme, and there are approximately 450 properties within it. There's also 45 carer permits that have also been issued, but the use of these would be on a more transient basis than resident occupants. As for Lifford Road itself, look more closely at this. There are parking areas along each side of the carriageway marked orange on the overhead photography, which equates to approximately 45 spaces if you take 6 metre length for each vehicle, and there's 40 properties on the road. Those 4 have direct access to off-street parking, and the alleyways also provide access to garages to the rear of various properties, although it's not clear how many of those are in use. I referred to my earlier comments about the assessment made regarding the sustainability of the site, and this is largely the reason for recommending without off-street parking provision. However, there does not appear to be a particular imbalance between spaces and properties either on Lifford Road and the wider North Wheatley permitting area, suggesting, at least some capacity exists if residents do have private transport. Therefore, subject to conditions outlined in your report, the proposal is recommended for approval.
We now have Mr. Richard Maddox, who is a local resident, has requested to speak in opposition to the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the red button when you want to speak and press it again to mute the microphone when you've concluded your submission. And we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Once again, thank you for the opportunity to again share the concerns of Lifford Road and specifically the residents of number 20. Whilst this is the 3rd time we've been able to address the committee, we hope the members can afford the time to understand our worries and hope fatigue doesn't set in. The concerns of the residents and the community have always been about the scale of the development and the potential associated adverse impact that such a large conversion will bring. I hope the members of the committee remember and reflect that this is a development of a terraced house in a quiet traditional terrace street with families and long-standing elderly residents, and this development is to be attached to 20 Lifford Road. Since the first meeting, the developer and the architects have had the opportunity to tweak plans, alter layouts, revise access and allay any concerns that the planning, environmental health and highways have had. Yet for the community and more importantly the neighbouring residents, nothing has changed. Ultimately, the development still remains unaltered in that it is still designed to house 7 individuals, with Unit 6 showing a double bed which could make 8 individuals, the conversion of a rear outbuilding to create a 1-bedroom apartment, adding more tenants. The adjoining property wall still has 5 adjoined bedsits, which will substantially increase the noise transfer into 20 Lifford Road. No noted plans for waste management. Concerns that the rear ungated alleyway will be used for access to and from the property, specifically to the new outbuilding, and parking will only become more difficult in a congested street. Once again, in any of the planning meetings, the developer has never attended or spoke to try and allay any of the fears of the residents or the community. I would like to remind the committee this is an adjoined terraced house, not a detached property. In the first planning meeting, one brave committee member asked directly to the planner would they be happy to live next door to this development. Whilst this is not a material objection and the chair noted this should not be answered, surely it's a thought that most people would have. The scale of developing an end-of-terraced house to such an extent is what is driving all the concerns of the community, the long-term residents at number 20, and also your own points from the committee on around parking and noise. In the last meeting, another committee member astutely asked, so how many people could be living at the property? And in our first address, we noted, would it not be unreasonable to assume that the tenants over time will develop friendships and personal relationships, which will only increase the traffic, noise of individuals arriving, leaving and staying at the property? The answer to that question was, it's not a planning issue, it's a licensing issue. Yet, who is left to monitor and manage this? Surely the purpose of reviewing any planning proposal is not only to make sure that the design meets the requirements of planning conditions, but it's also to understand the impact and the footprint the development will leave for the existing residents and community. Therefore, there has to be a wider view, more than does it just meet minimum standards and planning obligations. Surely there is an obligation to understand what impact is left from such a development. Does maximising the footprint of a traditional terraced house to obtain the maximum number of rentable units create a better place to live, where the potential for antisocial behaviour, noise, waste and environmental issues are measurably increased? These factors cannot be left to the residents.
Apologies for interrupting you, but some of the residents have stated that they can't hear at the back. Is it possible that you could speak a little louder, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
These factors should not be left to the residents and the community to deal and challenge after planning has been granted. We again ask the committee, as the last backstop, to reflect and question, has the development been designed to maximise the number of tenants that can possibly fit into the space, to the benefit of the developer and to the loss of the community? If the committee feels that by supporting such a development, it can ensure that the existing residents at 20 Lifford Road and the community will not be adversely impacted from noise disturbance, antisocial behaviour, waste issues, a reduction in privacy and adding to the parking issues. If not, it should again consider if this is the right proposal for the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Apologies for interrupting, but it's important that everybody can hear what you do have to say. I'm going to ask the committee members, do you have any questions that you wish to ask? No? Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr Maddox. Okay, we was going to have Councillor Gemma Cobby up next to speak, but unfortunately she's not able to attend. Therefore, we've got Councillor Dave Shaw, who is a ward member and is requested to speak in opposition to the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you're ready to start, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I'd just like to set the scene, really. Some of you may have saw me measuring the table in front of you earlier. That table is 4.5 square metres. The RSPCA says a 20 kilogram dog should have 8 square metres, and a prison cell minimum is 5.4 metres. Doncaster Council have set a spatial standard of 10 square metres, unlike the government, which is 6.5 square metres. Unfortunately, we are not upholding that 10 square metres. 10 square metres that councillors supported through the local plan and voted to be accepted. In your paperwork, local plan 9.10, 3 lines down, it says, however, in order to obtain an HMO licence, the council encourages bedroom sizes, in brackets, including space for an ensuite facility of at least 10 square metres. However, in the actual guidance, which is DMBC Housing Standards HMO Revised 2015, it says room sizes are exclusive of any ensuite room. It also says that space standards for category A HMOs room size must. It's not a bit less or let's have less, it is must. So the paperwork you've been presented by the planning officer is incorrect, and it is incorrectly stated that the space provided shall include the en-suites. So, over to room sizes then. So, given that, and given that it's accepted that an ensuite will take up 2 square metres, it leaves Unit 2 and Unit 3 under 10 square metres, one being 9 square metres, the other being 9.5 square metres. When you reduce the size once again by 1/5, as the planning officer has just stated, which is 200 centimetres square, that takes the size of the rooms down to one being 8.6 metres square and one being 9.1 metres square. I'll just remind the committee, the RSPCA says a 20 kilogram dog should have an area of space 8 square metres. So we're putting a person in a space 0.6 square metres larger than the RSPCA says a dog should have. If you think about a single bed is approximately 1 metre by 2 metres. Now, in Tim Simpson's withdrawn objections, it does say Unit 7, which is now being addressed, but it says Units 2, 3, 7 have gross floor areas which result in bedroom floor areas below the expected 10 square metre standard. That's absolutely correct. When the en-suites are removed, because he's read the legislation and he understands what it means. This provides a poor standard. That's the Environmental Health Officer. This provides a poor standard. He's referring to bedrooms that are under 10 square metres. Okay, he withdrew that advice because he was under the misapprehension that by providing communal space that this would negate that. However, government guidance, Housing Multiple Occupation Residential Property Licence Reform, updated 9th of October 2019, states communal space in other parts of the HMO cannot be used to compensate for rooms smaller than the prescribed minimum. That's government legislation. Our prescribed minimum is 10 square metres, which we're not adhering to. In the local plan 9.4, under strict criteria, the policy states there are concerns around the quality of living for occupants of these dwellings. They will only be supported under very strict circumstances which provide adequate internal living standards. We are not providing adequate internal living standards by our own standards and by the standards that councillors, elected members of this council, asked to be enforced. It also goes on to say that
1 minute remaining.
Yeah, such should be capable of conversion without harming the amenities of neighbouring residents. Amenities included are availability of parking. This development cannot help but undermine the ability of local residents to access parking. Also, in terms of the communal space provided, sufficient sized external communal areas to accommodate waste and recycling bins, cycle storage and on-site parking. Back to 9.28 of the Policy 9, strict criteria in relation to the development of HMO states, adequate accommodation and sufficient on-site parking. We've provided no on-site parking. Just lastly, the neighbourhood team said to add a minimum of 9 further residents would add further pressure to an already busy location. It is felt useful to take the view that new residents will in fact want access to their own mode of transport. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Committee members, are there any questions that you would like to ask Councillor Shaw? I'll ask Councillor Shaw. I was quite enthralled by the information that we were providing. So you were just making a statement just then. Would you like to finish that comment regarding, you were mentioning about the communal area, the storage, the bins, etc.
Yes.
The concern would be relating to what the impact of ceremony bins on the actual paths as well. So if you could just clarify.
Yeah, so basically we've recognised in Doncaster that we have a significant issue. That's why we brought in Article 4. And, you know, some of that is used to control HIMOs and bring in minimum standards. And I think that the thing that we need to take from this policy is strict criteria. And when it says, you know, communal areas to accommodate waste and recycle bins, which there's no real proper outline of how many bins, how much space it's going to take up, cycle storage and on-site parking, to then turn round and say, oh, we don't need on-site parking in an area that's got to have a permit scheme because parking is so bad, is not strict criteria. I fail to see how that is possibly strict criteria when you consider that this is likely, and I've heard it's going to be marketed to doctors and nurses who work across 3 sites. You know, we've got Mexborough, we've got Bassett-Law and we've got Doncaster. My wife's a nurse and she does that. You know, she needs to park somewhere locally. We know exactly the issues around parking. So I think, you know, we are constantly working against our own policies, or the planning department are constantly working against our own policies. We have the policies here, committee and chair, to stop this going forward. It's whether the committee should choose to do so. but we definitely have the policies that should stop this overdevelopment of a property. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor. Do you have any other questions for Councillor Shaw? Councillor Hogarth.
Yeah, it's just regarding the space, because we've been assured throughout that it meets the design space standards, so you're telling us no it don't. Can you?
Yeah, I can. So just back to it. So in the paperwork you've been provided by the planning officer, there's a crucial thing here. It's is the ensuite included or is not the ensuite included? So you have two rooms. One is 11 square metres, one is 11.5 square metres. The planning officer has put in his report that that includes space for ensuite facilities. However, just to reiterate, in our DMBC Housing Standards for Housing Multiple Occupancy, HMOs revised 2015, it clearly states room sizes are exclusive of any ensuite bathroom. Therefore, you need to take away 2 square metres from all the room sizes. So you've got one that's 11.5 square metres, you've got one that is 11 square metres. Take away 2 square metres, leaves you with 9 square metres and 9.5. Take away the additional for soundproofing that the planning officer has just stated, and that is, he stated it as 1/5 of a metre square, which is 200 centimetres square, leaves you with 2 rooms, one which is 8.7 metres square, and another that is 9.1 metres square. And just so, if the planning officer should suggest that the communal area in some way can go towards minimising that lack of space, as I stated before, government guidance, Housing in Multiple Occupancy Residential Property Licence and Reform, updated 9th of October 2019, clearly states communal space in other parts of the HMO cannot be used to compensate for rooms smaller than the prescribed minimum. So therefore, we have 2 rooms that fall well short of the prescribed minimum. And as a result of that committee, I would ask you to turn down this application.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank you
Shaw.
very much.
Do you have any other supplementary questions, Councillor Hogarth? No. Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, thank you for that, committee members. We will now go into debate. Does any member wish to comment on the report or ask the planning case officer a question? I'm going to go to Councillor Beach, then Councillor Hogarth.
Yes, in view of what Councillor Shaw has just pointed out, the other thing that bothers me, on page 23, there's a faint outline of the building, but on it it's showing bike store and bin store. Now, having been on the site visit, I'm very well aware that it looks on the drawing though it's flat, when it isn't, it's down steps. So, although it's the space, I would submit it's not usable space in the sense of you can't put a bike store or a bin store, down steps. So either the land would have to be raised, which would be to the detriment of next door, or dug out, which would be just as bad. So although it looks flat, I think that the idea of putting the bin and the bikes in these various places on this drawing is really a no-no.
Thank you for that, Councillor Beach. Councillor Hogarth?
Yeah, in view of what Councillor said, can the officer explain regarding the sizes, the room sizes, how it complies?
I'll just jump in that just quickly, thank you. So 9.11 of the officer's report correctly details that under the Housing Act 2004 there's a legal minimum requirement, and that's 6.51 square metres, and the rooms are in excess of that. The document that Councillor Shaw was referring to in relation to HIMO licensing isn't a planning document, it isn't planning policy, it comes under licensing. So members need to consider what has been mentioned, which are very valid points from Councillor Shaw, but that wouldn't be reasons for members to take into consideration in terms of planning policy. That is not a planning document that's been adopted. It's just to whether a facility will get a licence or not. However, it is important to note, just for clarity, having pulled up that document, that Councillor Shaw is absolutely right, and it says, please note that all advisory room sizes are exclusive of any ensuite bathroom facilities that may be provided.
So if that is a little bit misleading in the report, we do apologise. But yet again, that is just in relation to licensing, and it isn't in relation to the planning policy.
Thank you for that, Roy. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah. If it's, so excluding the ensuite, so surely when you measure a room, you measure it with the same tape measure. So surely if that applies for licence, why, there's nothing to say it doesn't also apply to planning, excluding the ensuite in the measurements.
I wasn't saying that. I was saying that the document that's been quoted from is in relation to if a operator is looking to license a house in multiple occupation. It isn't a planning policy that we as a planning committee can refer to. We are not allowed to replicate other authorities or regulatory processes. However, as you have heard, policy 9 in the local plan deals with houses in multiple occupation, and that does talk about, as Councillor Shaw mentioned, the overall size of dwelling needs to be sufficient to provide proper and adequate accommodation and living space for the number of residents intended to be accommodated. So you as a committee have heard concerns from a local resident and the ward member over the size of the rooms. The officer is saying that it is above and beyond what is required as a legal minimum under the Housing Act 2004. It has been a little bit misleading in terms of how it's being reported in that it talks in the officer's report about 10 square metres at least, including ensuite facilities. It's excluding ensuite facilities. So if you want to be considering this, I would guide you towards policy 9 of the local plan.
Thank you for that, Roy. Councillor Anderson.
Thanks. I've got concerns about the outbuilding conversion. It will be facing the main building, overlooked from several different rooms, including communal areas. There'd be no privacy at all within that building. I want to ask officers, if these were separate houses, would the lines of sight and separation distances be allowed? Because it seems... Look, I don't think it would, but I bow to your technical expertise there.
Do you want to project the plan?
Yeah, can do. Yeah. Okay, so on the ground floor, it's the kitchen window that faces out the back. The bedroom window on Unit 2 is largely obscured by the rear projection, and then the window on Unit 6, I mean, because it's a single-storey flat roof, would, I mean, look straight over that, and going to have to access it from, you know, within the same property, and it's let out by the same property. So, you know, taking that, you know, into balance, I didn't consider that, you know, that was reason. Given those reasons, I consider it, you know, that aspect of it was acceptable.
Councillor Sophie Lou.
Hello, I have a question. You mentioned that for Sean mentioned that the room should be 10 square meter without in-suite. It's for the policy 9 for getting license for HMO. But this house is applied for operating HMO. But if you pass this and then they go to get license, they're not gonna get license. How can they operating as HMO?
Well, if they don't get a license, then they can't operate as an HMO.
As well. We have had a number of appeals that members need to be aware of for houses in multiple occupations, some not too far away from this, which have been allowed. It is very much on a case-by-case basis and every application considered on its merits. But one of the key findings from some of these allowed appeals is that some of the room sizes may just fall short of standards, but you have to take an overall balanced view as to whether that is harmful. So if something is something that's saying that it needs to be 10 square metres and it is just ever so short of that, that's where members have to take a considered, informed view as to whether that is harmful, and then that would allow the policy concern to kick in effect. And yet again, the guiding principle, as Mark's just said, is that just because something gets something through one regulatory regime, i.e. planning, we can't take into account what another regulatory regime may or may not allow. So in the, you know, it could be, for example, that planning may be granted, but it wouldn't get a licence. You have to judge basically how harmful the lack of space is.
Thank you for that. I think one of the concerns is it seems to be there's several parts of this, whereas we're looking at probably 8 tenants, only 5 parking permits. We're looking at probably overdevelopment of an area where we're not going to promote a good size for mental health and well-being and living conditions for people. There's issues regarding the storage of bins, etc., noise and impact on residents. This isn't resting very well with me, because also looking at this, making assumption that it would be doctors, nurses that would rent it, or however the sustainability of this as well, because it's very limited. So I think where it states we have to look at a HMO and meet the criteria, I think it's falling short to meet those criteria and standards that have been set, in my opinion, at this moment in time. I'm going to fetch Councillor Cox, because he'd like to speak as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just go for it. I move that we don't grant permission on reasons that I was gonna. You've kind of nicked my thunder, Chair. But you know that's your prerogative, isn't it? Thank you.
Apologies for that, Councillor Cox. If the committee would bear with me one moment, because Councillor Beach also wanted to make a comment, and I think it's only fair that we make sure that everybody is heard on planning committee when they want to. I appreciate you put forward for a refusal, and we'll come back to that if that's okay with you, Councillor Cox. Okay, Councillor Beach.
Yes, I'm looking at the, well, in particular the kitchen area. Having been in the property and seen how minute it is, to me, it's consigning these residents to perhaps a cup of coffee and a piece of toast, but the long and short of it is, it's basically saying you're going to have takeaways or eat out all the time, which makes their costs of living much higher. They're living in an HMO, which presumably for reasons are either they're here for a short time or else they are not able to afford anything larger. To me, it's adding to costs that they probably can't afford, because I mean, you know, how do people cook in a small area like that? Even presumably, I think you have to have more than one cooker and more than one fridge and all the rest of it. So, you know, how do you fit it all in, and the people?
I mean, just on the, you know, you said you'd seen the kitchen. Actually, what you saw is the current building. I think it is. There is. If I just get the elevation drawings, might be able to slightly clearer. I mean, if you can look at the rear elevation in the bottom left, you can see where the window is. It's shaded to the right of that. So actually, the current kitchen would be, I would say, probably a good, at least third wider than what you saw when you were there.
Councillor Stapleton and then Councillor Farmer.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, can I just clarify? 'Cause I'm getting older, my memory's getting poor. We've looked at this that many times. If this was just one less person, am I correct? It wouldn't require planning permission from us.
No, because it's in the Article 4 area, so all applications for HMOs in Town Ward and Hexthorpe require HMO, irrespective of whether they're the small HMOs and the use class C4 or the larger ones like this, which are you know, are more than seven, can accommodate more than seven or more people.
Yeah,
Well, if I could just elaborate, had it not been in an Article 4 direction area, then it would have not required planning permission because it is considered to be akin to a large family home.
yeah, thanks. That's what I was sort of thinking. This is more of an opinion, really. Surprisingly, I actually agree with Councillor Shaw on what he's saying, and I'm pleased that he's brought up the differences. And I get it. I do understand it's not a planning issue, but as councillors, we're looking at being responsible for helping people in the community. And if we've created as a council a policy that you've alluded to, and it's not being adhered to, but because the planning policy almost goes against it, I think the answer is quite simple. We have to use our planning policies to support the housing policies, because that's what we've. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? But that's what, as a council, we set that standard. And I mean, talking about, it was interesting when we mentioned about doctors and nurses. Many years ago, believe it or not, I was a student nurse. I wouldn't live in that. And I lived in the nurses' home, which was bigger. The room I had was at least a couple of metres bigger than that. And I would never live in that. And all the SHOs and doctors I work with, I don't see them living in it. So at the minute, I'm in agreement with other members on this committee that I can't see that this is suitable. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stapleton. Yes, Ryan, then we're going to go to Councillor Farmer.
Just as members are going into some really good debate here, thank you. Just to clarify, you can't put any assurances on this being used for doctors or nurses in close proximity. We do not have that control. This would be, if granted, a 7-bed house in multiple occupation, and it could be anybody. They are obviously subject to licensing regimes, and that ensures that they do need to be run properly. So we have heard on previous examples of houses in multiple occupation applications where residents, rightfully so, do have concerns about the unknown and what kind of tenant are we going to get in there and so on. If the licensing regime is up and fit for purpose, that should be ensuring that it is a properly run, managed facility. So I just wanted members to be aware of that.
Can I just add? I just want to advise members to use caution with the licensing and the planning regimes. You can take into account the planning policy because that's a material planning consideration. The licensing documents you've been referred to are not. So be careful because you will land yourself in hot water if you give weight to things which are not material planning considerations, as you know.
Councillor Farmer, thank you for waiting patiently.
Thank you. I asked the question, I think, in the first planning committee about the size of the rooms. So for the past two meetings, we've been misled by the size of the room because it's got to include exclusive of the bathrooms. So we're clear on that now. Yeah? I personally think this application, the design is oversaturated. And if we can compare it with a large family home, well, it's a large family home anyway with 5 bedrooms. But if it's a large family home, we're not all going to get a bedroom each, are we? 8 members of the family are not going to get 8 bedrooms each. You know what I mean? So it's poor design where the waste is concerned. How is the waste going to be transferred from the rear to the front on bin day as well? How many bins are we going to put on the pavement? Is it going to be a commercial, big bin, big litre bin, or are there going to be the black bins? On bin day, there's going to be 8 bins outside that property. Parking is another issue. If only 5 applications can be applied for, what about the other 3? It's just poor design. Thank you.
Just for members' awareness, and forgive me, I wasn't at the last meeting, so I can't recall, but we have undertaken a site visit to this property, and when we were out there, it was actually bin collection day, as I recall, and bins were being left in the rear alleyway there, so the bins would be just taken out round the back. So it's just to confirm that. We have consulted our waste recycling team, and they haven't raised any concerns in principle, subject to the condition requiring a waste recycling plan to be submitted. So we do have control over that in terms of detail. In relation to parking, that is often cited as a concern, and in the lots of appeal decisions that we have had, and yet again, I'm not saying that to force members into a corner, but we have to learn from what our learned inspectors have said on previous appeal decisions, is that this area, where some of these appeals have been decided, are below the parking standards that are expected, i.e. one space for one property, for one bedroom. But the main overriding issue is that this is deemed to be a sustainable location. And inspectors have even gone even further than that and said that some of the people who may actually be living in such properties probably, although it's not for certain, won't have a car. They will be, for example, in this instance, we've heard it may be the walking to the hospital, or it may be the catching a bus or a train somewhere. I think in just general it is recognised that these properties, these facilities don't need the amount of car parking that is actually required on other kinds of developments similar to this. And regardless of which, Mark's gone away from the last planning committee meeting and inquired with our parking team, has shown a plan showing the permitting area, and the general feeling I got from Mark's presentation was that there is adequate capacity within that permitting area should the future occupants decide to apply. I just want to exercise basically, or express caution in terms of parking as a reason for refusal, if that is the way that you are looking to go, but that is entirely in members' gift as the decision makers, and likewise bins. But you have also mentioned things like overdevelopment, poor living conditions, bin storage and noise impacts. Thank you, committee.
Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Roy. I get where you're coming from. My issue is not really about the parking. I did the site visit, and one of the things I think is important to point out, as Mark's already mentioned, we did the site visit. The rear garden is very small, as Councillor Beach said. It's on 2 levels. From what Mark's telling me, part of the rear elevation on the left-hand side, as you look at it from the garden, hasn't been built yet. That's going to be built out. That's going to, am I right? So that's going to take away some even more of that garden space. So what you've got usable for bins, storage and cycle storage is basically the area that's in front of the annex, the end bit. So the person living in there who's only got one way in and one way out and has only got one window on that elevation has got to look out their window or come out their door into a load of bins. How's that going to be in the summer? I live in a rural area. I get lots of flies in my house during the summer months. That's going to be horrendous, living there during the summer with those bins with fly swarming and everything, which to me is unsanitary and unsafe, and I can't support it, I'm afraid.
Councillor Cox.
Again, I move that we refuse it.
Okay, I'll go through my script, shall I? And we'll get to that one bit. So is there a mover for the recommendation? Thank you. Okay. As the decision of the committee is to refuse the application, which is contrary to the case officer's recommendation, members of the committee must outline their reasons why they have resolved to refuse the application and why it was necessary to deem that action. So therefore, Councillor Cox, you've moved that this be rejected. Can you therefore outline those reasons, please?
I think we can go first to report, and as has been mentioned, that it's been somewhat misleading in room sizes. I have where I did and thought that having the local plan were a great thing, but now we're seeing that the policies don't align. They need to align, and we could, and we have spent a lot of time looking at this, and we have, obviously, as has been pointed out, been in some regard given the wrong information. In I mean, surely, why, when questions were asked before about room sizes, and there were, when we've been out to site visits, and same as many people have said, that courtyard would be dark. There'd be no light in there. You know, I mean, and now we are now looking at it with questions that we've asked before, and I just cannot get my head around why we'd want to put people into an area that is just satisfactory for a dog.
Therefore, what you're saying is because
Room sizes.
the sizes are licensing rather than planning policy, I think you're looking at the overdevelopment of the site, poor living conditions, the negative impact on people's health.
Yeah.
For me as well, it's regarding the noise and the loss of amenities for local residents.
I think as well.
So I think it's more like, say, the overdevelopment. There's no rear garden for people to enjoy, socialise, and things like that. So, well, I think realistically, we're looking at, like, say, 8 people in a small overdeveloped space that is going to impact. And there's a comment in the report from the management area manager saying that it looks like it wouldn't be the correct location either, relating to noise, etc. So I just think this application is poorly thought out. I think it's overdevelopment of the area. I think it will impact on the loss of amenities for neighbours and residents. Even with the parking, may not be what the class is a strong point. 5 permits out of 8 is near enough a 50%.
Can I just make a
below
point
what's
on that
recommended.
one, please, Chair?
So yes,
please. Because I think the assumption that somebody would not have a car is wrong. And just because somebody lives in an HMO doesn't mean they don't have a car. And when we refer to people as they, I think it's just horrible. So I'd like to see it in reports coming forward that we see a change in that, and the assumption is that everybody is on a level playing field instead of an assumption that because somebody lives in an HMO that they're somehow lower down the scale than anybody else. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anything else that you wish to add, Councillor Stapleton?
Yeah, I agree with every point you've made so far is valid. I think just to put this into context, as far as the oversaturation of the site, I think sanitary condition is vital here, because I don't know about anybody else in the room, but I live in a household with one other adult. Our black bin is filled every time I take it out, so that's 2 of us filling that every fortnight, chock-a-block. Now, if you've got 8 people living there, I would suggest they probably create more rubbish than your average citizen, because they haven't got room to store food and things like that. There's very little room there. So they're probably going to have to be buying food on a regular basis, could create more rubbish. It's all going to go into these bins. Well, 8 people minimum live in there. 4 big black bins and 4 green bins, or sorry, blue ones. And by the time we finish, we got how the hell is that person supposed to even get in that property at the bottom end? They'd have to push all the bins out of the way, and then they're going to topple over. Then it's just crazy. So I think sanitary conditions is the big one.
Are you happy for that to be added, Councillor Cox, to your objection? Okay. Are we happy with the reasons given so far? Yeah.
Okay, can I just recap then? Because what I've got down, or what I'm hearing is concerns about overdevelopment of the proposal, leading to poor living conditions owing to room sizes being too small. There's concerns about noise and the loss of amenities for not just the people occupying, but also the neighbours, in terms of just saturation, too many people in a small space is, I think, what you're saying. Lack of parking, you've heard from Roy, that's probably not the strongest point, but it's up to you, obviously, if you want to continue that. And then lastly, I think, Councillor Stapleton, you were saying that you think there's a lack of waste provision in terms of number of bins to accommodate that many people. Is that a fair assessment?
Sorry, I think, given the amount of space there, and also the physical mechanism, it only takes one person not to take their bin out the back, and that's a bin overflowing. So you've got potentially four black bins, 4 blue bins, potentially, you know, if these are shift workers, nurses, doctors, they might not be around to take the bins out in time. And I can just see it becoming just one big mess. So yeah, the waste refuge system that's proposed is not acceptable to me.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hogarth.
Can you just clarify where you get the figure of 4 bins? I think there might be 7 bins. 7 black, 7 blue. Will not be any green.
It all depends on what the waste management agreement would be, whether they have tray bins, etc. So that would be something that would be dealt with. Okay, so is there a seconder for the proposal? Okay, so can we have a show of hands, please, in favour of the proposal? And that's unanimous that the application has been rejected. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask now if we can have a quick toilet break. Are we happy to have a 5-minute toilet break? Okay, so we are back. We're back at 3 p.m. Right, gentlemen, if we can hurry back to your seats, please. We're a little bit over time. Thank you. Right, apologies, I will try and speak up so that you can hear. So can we, when speaking, can we try and raise our voices a little bit because they're struggling to hear what we've got to say? Okay, so application number 2 is planning application 22/00255/REMM, which are the details of access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of design for 248 units with 25 affordable units and 223 open market units, being matters reserved in outline application previously granted under permission reference 15/01/278/OUTM on the 5th of the 2nd 2019. The amended plans and description at land to the east of Mere Lane in Edenthorpe, and Stephen Gill is the planning case officer that will introduce this item. Thank you.
Just have to bear with us just for 1 minute, committee. Since we had a break, the laptop's locked us out, but we're just getting it back up and we'll be presenting very shortly. It's there, it's just not there.
Oh, for that magic.
God bless you, Alicia.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon, members. So the application today that you're considering is a reserved matters application for phase 1 of the development at Mere Lane. The proposal is for 248 units overall, 223 market houses and 25 affordable homes. As set out in the committee report, the only matters that should be considered as part of this application are the matters reserved as part of the outline planning permission, which are access, scale, appearance, layout and landscaping. The principle of residential development has already been established through the outline planning permission. Since the approval of the outline planning permission, the development has been divided into 4 phases. Phase 1A, which covers the access arrangement, just bear with me. And phases 1, 2 and 3 cover both housing and the open space provision. So the phasing's on the left, so phase 1 is bottom left-hand corner and the open space to the south as well. Phases 2 and 3 are north and to the east. One crucial point to note with this application is that the outline planning application was granted prior to the adoption of the new local plan, SPDs and the neighbourhood plan. The reserve matters application is bound by the requirements of the outline planning permission and the conditions associated with that planning permission. And because the outline was not assessed against the new local plan policies, we cannot enforce the latest policy requirements on this reserve matters application. However, crucially, it should be noted that the applicant has worked very proactively with us to meet those policy requirements. So in terms of the surroundings, to the southwest, west and north, the site is surrounded by residential properties, and these are generally 2 stories with a mix of mostly brick and render. Oh, one slide. Oh, sorry, missed a slide there. The images above are typical house types to the west, and one to the right is a new development to the north. To the east and south is more of a rural setting, as you can see from the aerial images. So those images are taken from the west of the site, from the resi, and the one at the top is taken from the north, just to give you a flavour of the characteristics of the general area. The site itself is generally flat, agricultural type land with no level changes, real level changes across the site, as you can see. So the main access point that will serve this all phases of the development was subject to a separate reserve matters application which has already been submitted and approved for the access details, which covers phase 1 of the site. The details submitted and agreed in that application is enough to satisfy the access requirements for this application, because the access will serve all phases of the development. The access point itself will be constructed off the A630 and proposes a 3-arm roundabout with footways either side. The technical detail has been thoroughly assessed by the Council's highway engineers, and no objections are raised to the specification or quality of the proposals. Okay, in terms of layout and scale, a design guide was approved for the site as part of discharging condition 3 of the outline planning permission. The applicant has worked very proactively with the urban design officers to formulate a layout that broadly accords with the aspirations and requirements of the design guide, and a lot of work has gone into this from both parties. Separation distances are acceptable, as are garden sizes. The layout includes a varied mix of 1 to 5 bed properties, which is welcomed as there is a distinct need for 2, 3 and 4 bed properties in the borough, as set out in the Housing Needs Survey. All house types are NDSS compliant, which is normally a standard expectation here. However, in this case, it is a benefit of the scheme, as there is no requirement for the applicant to meet that policy ask for the reasons that I've already set out. 10% affordable housing is proposed in the layout, and these units are spread across the site. This level of affordable housing provision was agreed as part of the outline planning permission and viability tested. The affordable housing will be a mix of 2 and 3 bed properties, and this is welcome given the ongoing need in the borough. The approved design guide for the site confirms the acceptability of 2.5-storey and 3-storey properties on primary streets and 2-storey properties in all other areas of the layout. There are 16 different house types proposed, 14 market types and 2 affordable types. These range from 2.5-storey to 2-storey. No objections have been raised from the urban design officers in relation to the house types proposed, their position within the layout, and in addition, the highways engineer does not object to the current scheme on highways grounds. That's for parking provision and road specification. So this slide gives a feel for the house types proposed. In terms of materials, there is a variation proposed across the site. The main material used will be brick, as described in the committee report. Some house types will be finished in an off-white render and rough brick to add some variation throughout the layout. The house types proposed for the most incorporate pitched roof designs with either grey, slate or terracotta tiling. Again, the urban design officers have reviewed the appearance of the house types and do not object. So just covering the landscaping briefly, a comprehensive hard and soft landscaping scheme has been submitted. Tree-lined streets will be created on both primary and secondary streets, as envisaged by the improved design guide. Where parking is not situated to the front of properties, grass turfs are proposed, along with ornamental shrub and hedge planting throughout. Whilst the principles of the landscaping scheme have been reviewed and agreed, there is still a requirement for the applicant to submit details to discharge condition 8 of the outline planning permission, and at that point, management of the landscaping will also be agreed. So as part of phase one, a large area of open space to the south of the site will also be incorporated. The western section of the open space will be used as a recreational area and will include provision for a meadow, a turfed kickabout area, basketball and five-a-side provision, an adventure play area and toddler area. In terms of equipment, this will need to be agreed with the council prior to installation, and a condition has been attached to ensure the requirement is met, which is set out in the committee report. A section 106 is attached to the outline plan revision, which sets out management requirements for the open space, and this is also set out in the committee report. So, in terms of drainage, many of the initial representations raised relating to this application were concerned with the potential impacts of the development on the existing drainage network. A couple of points to note on this are: one, an overall drainage strategy has been agreed for all phases of the development as part of satisfying the requirements of Condition 10 of the Outline Planning Permission. The details have been reviewed and agreed with the LLFA, and no objections have been raised. As part of agreeing this detail, the applicant has also agreed to upgrade parts of the existing drainage network, and the details of this are set out in the committee report. 2, the applicant has submitted a site-specific proposal for phase 1, which is for a new infiltration pond situated to the south of the site near phase 1A. And that image there to the south of the site there, just west of the roundabout proposal. And the applicant has also agreed to upgrade parts of the existing drainage network. The LLFA have reviewed these proposals and do not have any fundamental concerns on drainage grounds. On the basis of the information submitted, no objections are raised on drainage. So this is just the conclusions and the planning balance. So the principle of development has been accepted by the Outline Planning Commission. The access arrangements have been robustly assessed and agreed with the highways engineer. The layout broadly meets the aspirations of the approved design guide. The appearance of the market and affordable housing types proposed are considered acceptable, and they also meet ongoing need identified in the housing needs survey. The open space and landscape proposals are acceptable, subject to condition, and for those reasons the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Stephen. We've now got Charlotte Hatton of Avant, the applicant, that has requested to speak in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Press the large red button when you're ready, and we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Members, thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. I'm Charlotte, the Regional Planner at Avant Homes, West Yorkshire. I would firstly like to confirm that there are no outstanding objections from any statutory consultees to this application. By and large, the comments that have been made by objectors in respect of the application relate to matters of drainage, design and capacity to local services. The principle to deliver housing on this phase of the wider site has been accepted as part of the outline consent approved through appeal in 2019. A reserved matters approval for the 3-arm roundabout which will serve the site and the wider site has been approved. Through collaboration between Avant Homes and the council officers, significant changes have been made to ensure that the scheme presented to members today has the support of the Urban Design Officer with no objections from any Doncaster Council officers. 16 different and energy efficient Avant house types are proposed, some of which are bespoke to ensure that the scale, mix and appearance of the proposed houses and the layout of the scheme is generally acceptable to the Urban Design Officer. The scheme complies with the site-specific design code and the South Yorkshire Residential Design Guide. In terms of the provision of affordable housing, in 2022 there were just under 9,000 households in Doncaster on the housing waiting list. 25 affordable homes, as agreed under the outline consent, will be delivered, which will assist with offering some of those in housing need a place they call home. These homes will be built to the same standard and quality as those for market sale. As the officer report sets out in paragraphs 9.15 and 9.16, Avant are willing for all 248 houses, including those that will be affordable, to be 100% compliant with the National Described Space Standards. This is above the standards secured under the outline consent. The landscaping proposed includes tree-lined streets and a large area of public open space to the front of the site, which will be a safe and accessible space for recreational uses such as a basketball, five-a-side, adventure play area and toddler activities within a green setting of meadows, wildflower and large trees. The proposed open spaces have the support of the Council Open Space Officer. Avant have had lots of engagement with the Parish Council and have met in person on 2 occasions to present and discuss our proposals and update progress with our application. The Parish Council have been positive about our scheme, but they do have concerns regarding drainage and the capacity of services in the area. In terms of capacity of services, this was considered at the outline application stage, and there is a Section 106 legal agreement which secures monies towards upgrading facilities such as education and public transport services. There is land at a later phase of the wider development, namely Phase 3, which includes the provision of a new primary school. On concerns regarding drainage and groundwater impacts from both Yorkshire Water and the Parish Council, we have submitted details to discharge outline condition 12, which included details on protecting groundwater quality. As a result, Yorkshire Water have removed its objection. Avant will be undertaking the necessary upgrades to the existing drainage network shortly, as outlined in paragraph 9.51 of the officer report. The LLFA and the Council's drainage officer accept the drainage strategies for the proposals will not increase the risk of flooding in the area and fits into the wider site drainage strategy. We have proposed a natural drainage solution which includes a pond to the front of the site offering a visual feature that provides opportunities to support the introduction and growth of biodiversity. Finally, following positive collaboration with the Council and Parish Council to overcome any previous issues raised,
1 minute remaining.
we urge members to approve this reserved matters application and support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I will now ask the committee members if they wish to ask any questions. So I'm going to go for Councillor Stapleton, then Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to try and get my head around. It's always quite complicated when we're looking at previous outline planning permissions and what we're doing now. So condition 9 of the outline planning permission required an archaeological evaluation of the applicant's site. And archaeology details to discharge the conditions were submitted as part of your application. And South Yorkshire Archaeology Service concluded that the condition could be partially discharged to allow phase 1A and 1 of the development to come forward. What I don't know, because I wasn't around 100 years ago when this was all first done, I can only go what I've got here. It's a simple question. Obviously, you've commissioned the archaeology on site as part of your application. I've already done a desktop study. I know that there is a rectilinear enclosure on that site that will be impacted by what you're planning to do. And it's to the right of the roundabout, or roughly where the what's the word? Play area. Yeah. And I appreciate we can't all, and that is really the only archaeology on site of any significance. And my only question is, has that been assessed by yourselves, as in there's been trenching put in there, or has it just been another desktop strategy?
We've undertaken a WSI in accordance with Andy Lyons at South Yorkshire Archaeology. We've undertaken trial trenching and strip mapping record, and we've found no significant findings as part of the Phase 1A application. We've got works that's going to progress as far as Phase 2 and Phase 3 that we're liaising with the archaeological and Andy Lyons again on the next phases. But as far as Phase 1, Phase 1A, nothing significant has been found.
Yeah, that concerns me, saying there's nothing been found. It's a matter of record that there is a rectilinear, prehistoric or Roman enclosure. It's there. It's free for anybody to go and look at. It is actually on that site. It's already been recorded by archaeologists. And I just want to know, really, have you actually investigated that site? Because it's all right putting trenches here, there and everywhere, but you've got a target that, to me, that should have been targeted and had a look at.
Councillor Stapleton, I'm going to pass Ryan can clarify some information on that for you.
And I'm going to pass over to Steve Gill, the case officer.
Hi, thanks for your question. So an archaeology evaluation has been carried out across the site. A written scheme of investigation has been undertaken and agreed with South Yorkshire Archaeology Service. I've spoken to SIAS today. So the situation is it's a strip map and record for anything impacted by the layout on Phase 1, and anything to the south in the open space is to remain in situ. So there was 95 trenches dug across the phase 1 site. So currently at the moment, they've actually done that work, and they're in the process of putting forward a post-excavation report. So anything, like I say, in the south end, in that open space, will be remaining in situ. Anything that's impacted by the layout will be a strip map record. So in terms of archaeology, SIAS are completely satisfied with the work that has been done at the moment, and they're in the process of agreeing a scope of work for phases 2 and 3.
Thanks both of you for that. I mean, my real question, and I think it has been answered, I just wanted to know that there's been some trenching been done rather than just a lazy desktop assessment.
90 odd trenches have been dug on that site.
Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you. I'd just like to know what is put in place to protect surface water getting into the aquifer, because it is one of the protected development sites, and it's mentioned in the local plan on 14.29 that Edenthorpe is a protected zone. So what is protecting the pond from all the water from there to penetrate into aquifer that obviously is our drinking water?
We've, as Charlotte mentioned, we've liaised with Yorkshire Water and Doncaster Drainage Authority. We've produced a hydrological risk assessment and a construction environmental management system, which details the protection measures that we'll undertake. As you mentioned, it's in the Source Protection Zone 2, and we've submitted our details, which we'll be carrying out as part of our construction works that's been agreed with Yorkshire Water, and they're satisfied with the mitigation measures that we'll be putting in place to ensure that no pollution occurs.
What are the mitigation? I hate that word mitigation, because it just means someone else is going to get...
Yeah, with regard to any storage of fuels or oils on the site, they won't be allowed to be used in those areas that's in within source protection zone, and also that we'll have to make sure that we can't use recycled products in that area. So it's a stringent environmental policy that we've had to adhere to in those areas.
Surely that also comes down to residents that are living there after it's developed. So is that because aquifer's a blinking big thing? So, I mean, they need to be aware, and obviously I would have thought there's sufficient filtering systems within that to prevent anything penetrating the ground, if you like.
Yeah, obviously any surface water will go into the highway system via trap gullies, and that will prevent any sort of oils getting into the network, as it were. And that's all been submitted to highways as well. Thank you for your question.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. Does any member wishing to comment on the report or ask the planning case officer a question? Councillor Hogarth.
Yeah, just my concern is that in the event of a road traffic accident at that roundabout, it's blocking access and egress to the whole estate. Is there another way in or out? It just seem a bit thing, you know, because you will get blockages there, and it's like, how do any emergency vehicles get through if that's blocked?
What I'd say about the access arrangement is that there's been a substantial amount of discussion about the size of that roundabout and the specification it needs to be acceptable to handle all the 3 of the phases of development and the existing traffic. Obviously, I'm not a highway engineer, but I have been party to the amount of discussion around the size of the roundabout and what it needs to be. And there have been no objections in terms of that access arrangement and its ability to cope with all 3 phases of the development.
I just can't understand. I thought there would have been another road out of the estate. You know, the road going in, that can get blocked quite easy. No traffic accident or anything. How do other emergency vehicles, other people on there, you know, having just one way in and the same way out, I don't think it would bring problems to the force. You know, vehicle, bin wagon breaks down in that area and it blocks the whole lot up.
I mean, the position of the access point was not the specification, but the position of the access point was agreed at the outline planning permission stage. So at that point, it was agreed that that was appropriate for the level of development proposed. I take your points on board about what you're saying, but in terms of the point of the access in its specifications, it is deemed as being acceptable for that to cater for all three phases of the development.
Yeah, 'cause I weren't looking at the access point, it was for another access or egress point.
I mean, something else might come forward as part of phases 2 and 3, but having said that, that's not being considered as part of this application. There might be an emergency access point that may come as a result of phases 2 and 3, but that's not something that's being considered as part of this application.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions? Okay, is there a proposal to approve the reserve matters subject to conditions? Is there a mover? That's been moved. Is there a seconder? That's been seconded. Can we have a show of hands of those in favour? That's unanimous, so that's passed. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Application number 3 is planning application 21/00398/MINA, which is the proposed northerly extension of the quarry workings into around 31.6 hectares of land to include mineral extraction, in-pit primary processing and transfer of mineral to plant site. Proposals also include creation of peripheral screen mound, advanced planting and progressive restoration of workings at land north of Home Hole Quarry in Stainton. Mel Roberts is the planning case officer and he will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just quickly go through the pre-committee amendments. There are a few there. Just to mention, we've had a couple of letters of support submitted since the report was written, stating similar reasons to those that were already mentioned by other people who are supporting it. We're also aware of 60 letters of support that have also been submitted to the Council. They are redacted and don't include names and addresses, so it's not possible to know who they're from, but it's understood that they do include the 25 that have already been submitted and are mentioned within the report. And again, these letters cite similar reasons for supporting the proposal, including creation of jobs, the need for the material, and that Breeden's a good company and so on, and it's a well-run site. So just to quickly go through the speakers, we've got a Mr. Parks, a resident. They're all speaking in support, these speakers. We've got Sarah Brown of Stainton Parish Council and Michael Adambrook of Braithwell with Micklebring. Parish Council, Councillors Greenhall and Cole. And then we've got Chris Furness of Breeden, who's also speaking. So just to go through the application itself, this is an application for a northerly extension to the limestone quarry at Stainton. And the thing to note on this plan is that the application site, which is the red line there, you can see does include land that already has consent for mineral extraction, which is identified by the green line there. And the reason they've done that is just to create a consolidated approach to merging the northerly extension into the existing quarry, and so that we've got a consistent restoration plan that fits in with the existing restoration for the quarry. So again, that's shown on this plan as well. So really the green line there shows what's already got permission, which includes Cockhill West and Cockhill East. So really what we're considering under this application is the land to the north of that, which is that strip of red line at the top there, just beneath the motorway. So it's worth emphasising that, you know, a large part of the red line has already got consent. So the proposed extension extends to around 32 hectares and would include the demolition of Peterwood Farm, which I think you can just pick out there within the northern section, just below the motorway. The proposal would yield around 90 million tonnes of limestone reserves, and the end date for the quarry would be around, well, it would be June 2035. You can also see from that aerial photograph that the land is predominantly in agricultural use, and there's fields of varying sizes, with the largest ones being located in the western part. So just in terms of surrounding land uses, to the north you've got the motorway there, to the east you've got woodland and agricultural land, to the south you've got the existing quarry, and to the west is also open agricultural land. Just to take you through a few photos, this is taken from Longgate, which is just to the south of the Cockhill east and west areas that I just pointed out. And this is looking down Rakes Lane, which basically runs through the centre of the quarry site. So looking at that photo, you'd be looking towards Cockhill West on the left-hand side and Cockhill East on the eastern side. And the good thing about that photo is it shows you how what they do as part of the quarry workings is they put these small sort of bundings around the quarry workings, so you don't really actually notice that there's a quarry there. So this is going further down Rakes Lane, and this is just looking towards the bridge that runs on over the quarry, where there's a connection between the Cockhill East and Cockhill West parts of the quarry. So there's a cut through underneath that bridge where the quarry workings are. So that's taken from the bridge, looking down into the quarry. That's looking towards Cockhill West. This is again looking down from the bridge, looking towards Cockhill East. So these photos are taken further up Rakes Lane, going towards the motorway, and now we're sort of going towards the area where the actual northern extension is going to be. So these bits aren't obviously being quarried at the moment. So this is looking southwest over the fields. This is looking southeast. This is looking northeast towards Peterwood Farm, which you can see there in that photo. And then this is looking northwest. This plan is just showing the direction of working. And again, you can see, I think it's probably not actually showing the quarry workings that are going on currently in Cockhill West, but you can see the Cockhill East bit there where the workings are going on, and you can see that they've already started in Cockhill West, and then if this gets consent, they'll carry on working in a northerly direction towards the motorway. This is the proposed restoration plan, and the restoration follows the same principles as have been agreed for the rest of the Home Hill quarry site, and includes habitat creation through woodland planting, lakes, grasslands, and also does include some agricultural land with hedgerow boundaries, and also includes the creation of public rights of way that would connect into the existing footway network. And that's the proposed restored levels. It's quite a lengthy report, so I was just really picking out the main issues that I thought were significant, really, in terms of, rather than going through every issue. So in terms of the principle, the site lies within the green belt. Paragraph 150 of the MPPF states that mineral extraction is not inappropriate, providing that it preserves the openness of the green belt. So you can see from the report there that I've set out that it doesn't conflict with the 5 purposes of the green belt, and also given the temporary nature of the proposal, the fact that minerals can only really be worked where they're found, and the limited visual impact, that in our opinion the openness would be preserved. So for that reason we consider it to be appropriate development in the green belt, and therefore they don't need to demonstrate very special circumstances. However, the applicant has put a case for the need for the material, and again that's all set out in the report, and we agree that there is a need for the material, and that would weigh heavily in its favour. So one issue of importance is vibration. This has been carefully considered as part of the environmental statement, and it's been shown that it would not cause any issues with impact on buildings. The number of blasts that are taken place on site are limited to normally around twice a week, and the hours of those blasts would be controlled by condition. The method of blasting and also the ground vibration levels will also be controlled through conditions, and also there'll be a requirement to carry out monitoring to ensure that levels are not exceeded beyond those that are considered acceptable. Breedons are already carrying out monitoring at the closest residential property to the quarry, and this has shown that vibration levels are well below those where you might expect to see any damage. So obviously the further you go away towards Old Edlington and that, the damage would, well, the impact would be even less, if at all noticeable. And that monitoring would also be required to be carried on as part of any further works. In terms of ecology, they have found bats at the farm, and mitigation measures will be in place to ensure that those bats are protected and alternative habitats created. There'll also be a requirement for a licence from Natural England. Because the site is agricultural, there's fairly low ecological value in terms of its current baseline, and given the restoration plans showing quite a lot of habitat creation, there'll be quite a significant uplift in biodiversity net gain of around 40%, which is well and above the policy requirement of 10%. In terms of highways, really everything stays the same as the existing arrangements with the quarry, utilising the same accesses, the same level of traffic, and the same highway restrictions will be secured by planning condition. There's certain roads that are not allowed to be used, and there are also highway restrictions on there in terms of loads, which ensures there's no traffic going towards Stainton. In terms of agricultural land, although there will be a loss of best and most versatile agricultural land of around 8 hectares, this is offset by the large uplift in biodiversity, as I've already set out in terms of the restoration proposals for the site. In terms of the economy, there are obvious economic benefits in terms of supplying materials to local companies and employing staff, of which 40 work at the quarry, and around 200 are employed through the supply chain. So in conclusion, it's recommended that planning permission be granted as per the conditions set out in the report. We have got a short video we'd like to show you just to give you a flavour of the quarry, and also it just shows you how the blasting works on there, if we can show you that. Oh, should I not have closed it? Sorry.
I'm Charlotte and I'm 22. I got offered to come and work at Weybridge as a contractor. I was only a contractor for a couple of months until I went up to the office and said I want to do my DAPS. I got offered an apprenticeship, started in November 19, and obviously COVID kicked off and ruined everything for a little bit. So I was off for 9 weeks, came back and worked with Levi. Levi's explosive supervisor. I love it, and now I'm a trainee shot firer. We blast now probably once a week because we're doing bigger ones. It's about 100,000 tonne now, 10 to 15 tonnes of explosive. We start off, we mark out the shot, pick up the holes with the staff. Every hole for the drill, it needs a drill log. Our driller needs to know what the depths and what he needs to be drilling at. And then we do a pre-scan, check there's nothing in the face, any weak spots. He drills it, then we do a proper scan. All of that data, everything that we've done, all goes into a blast spec. Explosive are lazy, they need help. So we have to use DETs, and we have a booster, and we put a electronic detonator called an icon, we put it into the booster, and then we've got a non-L that goes into the booster as well, and then we lower it down the hole. The explosive goes on top of that. After we've done that, we stem it. We put stemming in the hole on top of the explosive to lock it in. So when we've loaded the shot up, we use our programmer, and the icons have got little clips on them, and we have to clip it to some wire, and then we wind the reel out. That's where we connect it all into the programmers. Once everything's all clear in the quarry and we've radioed through and we've made sure everything is safe and there's no one around, that's when we can fire it. Hold the 2 buttons down and fired. We need to check everything's gone off. We need to see if there's any fumes, because there's a problem if there's fumes. We do a walk down, check all the face is right, check there's no holes that have not gone off. It can take a week to get a shot ready, and then the blast goes off within a second. So when we've blasted and we look at the blast, we want some good fragmentation. We want to see that it's blasted and there's not huge boulders in it, and we don't want it too fine, but we want it just right for the digger driver. The future for me here, I want to do my explosive supervisor. I want to carry on as long as I can, but in the end I probably want to go into management. I want to do my DAPS and then go into management. That's what I want to do.
Does that end your presentation?
Yeah. Could do getting it up there, can't we, just in case you want to talk through anything.
That's it done, Chair.
Thank you for that, Mel. We've got Mr Parks, who is a local resident and is requested to speak in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you're ready to speak, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Hello there, I'm John Parks. I'm a neighbour to the quarry. I've lived where I live at Cockillfield Lane since 1969. That's 54 years. I built my house then and I've not had any damage to it by the quarry. There's been various owners. Breedens do liaise with local people, and they will listen to people. When you have to speak to them, you will get somebody to speak to you. Not a number. They will take your observation and will take it into consideration. The quarry, from where I live, I'm within 900 metres from the face the working, I think it is. And the noise, we do hear the explosion, but the noise from the quarry, we don't hear that at all. Motorway noise is more what we hear, not the quarry noise. And as regards dust, we don't get any dust. We've never had a complaint about dust. And we also don't really see the quarry. The quarry has been well sheltered from the public, and we get on quite well with the quarry. The quarry, they like to be hear what's happening in the local areas, and they are sort of helpful and towards help where they can. The landscaping and the wildlife is excellent. We have a badger set very close to in the quarry, and we have wildlife is improved actually to what it was, and they adhere to the rules, and the company is fine, and I think the application should go forward. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr Parks. Do we have any questions for Mr Parks? No? Okay, thank you very much. We've now got Parish Councillor Sarah Brown, Stainton Parish Council, and Mike Adambrook from Braithwell and Micklebring Parish Council, who have requested to speak in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes collectively.
I'm really sorry, I'm hard of hearing, I can't hear what you're saying.
I will try and shout. In other words, when you press your red button, you'll have 5 minutes to share between you. and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining. Okay, thank you.
You're going first, Sarah.
Yep. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. As chair of Stainton Parish Council, Breedon's been a brilliant neighbour to us, but I must say that Stainton was named after the stone, and for 2,000 years it's been our neighbour, and a good neighbour it's been. And we particularly want to support this because we feel it's very important for the future of Doncaster and for Stainton, because this is why we exist as a village. They are great neighbours, as was outlined. They support us. But what we have is not just formal communication, but informal communication. So we can always ring them up. We can talk to Aldo, who runs the quarry, and it's a good neighbour. So there are obviously issues that happen sometimes, but we can always find a way to address them. So we would thoroughly recommend the application. We know that we need to continue to get aggregate locally. It would be a disaster for the environment if we didn't. Thank you.
I'm Vice Chair of Braithwell with Middlebring Parish Council, and I'm here to support this planning application. As a parish council, we share the views and experiences of Stainton Parish Council. Breedon have worked closely with us and have responded extremely well to requests for help in matters relating to our village. I've been a Braithwell resident for 46 years, living close to the quarry. I'm a retired aggregate specialist with 50 years experience in South Yorkshire and beyond. I'm therefore able to assure that this deposit is the only quarry in South Yorkshire capable of producing the quality required for roadstone construction and concrete aggregates, etc. Any material of a comparable quality would have to come from North Yorkshire, Derbyshire or further afield. All the quarries, quality sand and gravel quarries that used to abound in the Blackstone and Finningley area are now worked out and closed, and this unique deposit is a massive asset to this area and is vital to both the building and construction industry and indeed to Doncaster Council itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your submission. Are there any questions from the committee for Councillor Brown or for Councillor Addenbrooke? No? Thank you very much. I'm going to go on to Councillor Martin Greenhalgh, who has also requested to speak in favour of the application. It's now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. So if you'd like to press the large red button when you're ready, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. I represent the ward that the quarry falls into, Tickhill and Wadworth Ward, and I have done since 2017 with my other ward councillor, Nigel Cannings. We were invited down to the quarry for a presentation a couple of months ago, much the same as what we've had here, a little bit more in depth, and actually went round it. And it's so quiet, it's so everybody's sort of like they've known each other for years. It's a good local employer. It was a happy atmosphere. We were very impressed indeed. And in all the time that we've had dealings with Stainton and Braithwell parish councils, or even the wider constituency, regarding any complaints, which have mainly really been through traffic in certain parts, the quarry has always responded in the most professional manner that anybody could ever hope for. And just for the record, I am a bit of a history buff, and what the chair of Stainton Parish Council said, the name of the village is named after the stone, and Home Hall Lane, which is principally a Roman quarry. When you go down it, you can see the workings, and indeed archaeology has revealed that stone from that quarry has been used for foundation work in York in the Roman times. So I think it's a great asset for Doncaster to have such a financially valuable source of basic expansion material that the city of Doncaster and the wider South Yorkshire needs on our doorstep. It's got to continue. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions? No, thank you very much for your submission. We're now going to go to Councillor Phil Cole, whose ward member has requested to speak in support of the application. It's your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. So when you press the large red button, we'll be on his way and we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you don't mind me standing. And also, I am speaking in a personal capacity as the ward councillor, not as a cabinet member. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Home Hall Quarry is sited to the south of my ward, Edlington and Warmsworth ward, but actually the northern extension is all within the Edlington parish and therefore falls within my ward. I have been involved in Edlington, Warmsworth and Old Edlington for 25 years, 13 as a ward councillor. In the whole of that time, I've dealt with 2 or 3 concerns that related to Breeden's activities, mainly unfounded actually. But what I've also experienced is that they support family fun days, they're present at a lot of the galas, they support, put aggregate materials to support local environmental projects, and they support local road safety plans in Edlington. Quarrying has taken place in this part of Doncaster for hundreds and hundreds of years, and I defer to my historian colleague, but for over 8 decades on this site, starting when it was Butler's Quarry in the 1950s. It is a critical part of our local economy. In truth, most of the activity that takes place at quarrying sites, like the activity at airports, does so without causing much disturbance to anyone. So I want to state why I think an 8-year extension after 80 years of working on this site is something that's entirely reasonable. And then I want to address the noise and traffic questions. First, I support local sustainable jobs, jobs that are skilled, that are well paid. This site employs 40 people, and there are several hauliers who have major contracts with Breeden. Most of the employees are in DN postcodes, but this site is the major supplier of the neighbouring Tarmac Maltby Block Works in Stainton. It supplies 90% of the content of the blocks they produce. They also happen to employ 21 people and have hundreds of drivers that service that site. Also, they're a principal supplier over 500,000 tonnes of aggregate a year to Marshall Aggregates, again in Stainton, a firm employing 60 people directly and also many drivers. So there is a clear employment benefit by allowing this work to continue for another 8 years beyond 2025, 8 to 10, depending on their production. But there is a sustainability question here as well. Your committee will approve plans every year for hundreds of new planned houses and employment sites in Doncaster. In fact, Doncaster has a target of 920 new homes per year, every year up to 2035 in our local plan. We have also plans for generating employment sites of 481 hectares of land that will be developed for employment. So building homes and creating jobs, it's a worthy ambition, but best served by ensuring that the highest proportion of material for those homes and workplaces can be sourced as close as possible to Doncaster. That's the environmentally sensible way to approach building projects. A demand, in fact, in Doncaster of over 2,000 million tonnes of aggregates a year, and the main source of that is, guess where? Home Hall Quarry. My case is that Doncaster needs this quarry. It lies in an area of low housing density with good routing plans to minimise disturbance on local roads for residents. Vehicle routing remains with most vehicles routed either through Maltby or Wadworth to the motorways.
1 minute remaining.
Reducing HGV traffic. There will be no great disturbance for the residents of Edlington. The main settlement is only 1 kilometre away, with the M18 in between. I've had a handful of residents who've raised vibrations or cracking or subsidence in their properties, wrongly attributed to quarrying. Historic settlement for mining activity is the most common reason for property movement. I attended one house where, although the manager put a vibration meter to coincide with them doing their blasting activity, it barely registered. In fact, all of their blasting activity over a 13-week period, which I think you've received the report, showed levels that are substantially below, by factors of 10 or 20 below, the levels that would cause any problems. Let me just say, the blasting, as you saw in the video, it happens once for perhaps once for a few seconds, and that lasts for 4 to 6 days. And the movement of the aggregate within the site on conveyor belts and so on.
Submission, your 5 minutes is up.
Can I just finish with one sentence?
I'll let you finish with one sentence.
Thank you very much. This is sustainable activity. The recovery of this site afterwards will be immensely important and achieve substantial biodiversity net gain, and it supports enormous employment, not just on one site but on 3, and I believe for that reason the committee should support this application. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cole. Do any committee members have any questions? No? Okay, we've now got Chris Furness of Breedon, the applicant, who has requested to speak in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button in front of you when you're ready to speak, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Chris Finesse, and I'm Regional Land and Mineral Resources Manager for Breedon and a Chartered Town Planner. Having considered the technical issues in detail, your officers and statutory consultees have concluded that there are significant benefits and reasons to support this planning application. I want to highlight the overwhelming reasons that we seek your support today and why this site is so critically important to the local economy, community and environment. You've already heard from supporters of the quarry, and we're delighted that both Stainton and Braithwell with Micklebring, our 2 closest parish councils, have written and attended to speak in favour of the scheme. You've also heard from ward councillors and residents who are fully supportive. I'm proud to be surrounded today by several of my colleagues. This is not just a planning application, it's a career, it's a driver of economic growth, and it's part of the community. A development that over 60 people, businesses, residents and employees have written to support. We recognise our role as part of the community, whether through the local liaison group, school visits, contributions to local community facilities and groups. Our second family fun weekend last year was attracted over 2,000 local residents for quarry tours and complimentary activities, and free ice cream, which was very popular. We support raffles and community fairs, improve community centres, provide children's football kits, donate aggregate and time, and we're currently working to support a road crossing in Edlington. Although they are rare, we respond to concerns wherever they arise, and we address them. We strive to be a good neighbour, and we minimise the impact of our operations. We made major investment in technology to optimise the blasting design to minimise the potential impacts of vibration, and those changes were employed to keep our impacts to a minimum, not because blasts were close to any permitted limits. We met with residents in Old Edlington this spring to provide reassurance and explain how blasts are managed. At the request of residents, specialists Blast Log, who are in attendance today to respond to any questions, installed a remote monitoring station to collect and monitor any vibration data over this summer. The results demonstrate that ground vibration from blasting is well below all limits. On many occasions, the equipment, which is set to the lowest level of human perception, did not trigger at all. On others, the levels were detectable, but still well below the vibration that would be encountered from normal household activities, for example, closing a door, magnitudes below any level that could cause property damage. The main thread that runs through the report and letters is the need for the mineral and the economic impact of the quarry. I'm accompanied by Lee Weatherall today, representing Marshalls, the operator of Maltby Works. You've heard about how many staff they employ and how much aggregate they use. Likewise, Tarmac. In total, over 200 jobs rely on aggregate from Home Haul, direct and indirect employees, hauliers, subcontractors. Many have written, and we're extremely grateful. The officer's report has set out that Home Haul supplies in excess of 90% of crushed rock sales for Doncaster and Rotherham, and has done for many years. The mineral is demanded because of its quality. It's the only quarry that can meet the need for construction-grade aggregates, supplying the major investments. over 150,000 tonnes to Hermes in Hoyland, 120,000 to Eyeport, 100,000 to Mulberry Logistics Parks. Residential schemes, road schemes, we supply everything in this area and in South Yorkshire. We're a local facility, an employer and an industry to be proud of, and it can't be replaced. There's no real alternative. Hauling materials from Derbyshire is unsustainable, unviable and contrary to policy. And it's not just those in the construction industry who benefit from the quarry. There'll be over 100 million spent on local suppliers and contractors over the life of the extension. £22 million gross value added per year, 18 million captured in South Yorkshire.
Remaining.
And what's the legacy of the quarry? Significant biodiversity net gain, up to 40%. Restoration, balancing public access, habitats and agriculture. 185,000 trees, 35,000 already planted. Public access, a resource for local people. Further community investment and employment. Holmhall Quarry has played an important role in the local economy and community for over 80 years and continues to be critical in the development of the region. The application before you today is for an extension to the quarry, one of the most efficient operations in the UK. Impacts are kept to a minimum. There is significant support, huge economic, environmental and social impacts. National policy highlights that great weight should be given to these benefits of mineral extraction. We hope to take it forward in genuine partnership with the local community and Doncaster Council. As I say, there are several people here today that can answer any questions, blasting specialists, myself, the quarry manager, regional manager, so please fire away with anything that you have. Thanks.
Thank you for your time. Do any committee members wish to ask the applicant any questions? No? Okay, no questions. Thank you. Right, committee members, we're now going to go into debate. Is there any questions that you'd like to ask the planning case officer, Councillor Stapleton?
Thank you, Chair. You know I like my debating period. I've got no questions. I think this is brilliant. For the first time in 2 years of me sitting on this committee, I've got a report that's comprehensive, done by it's a brilliant report. It's got everything I need in it. I've got people from the local community saying they want it. It's just, to me, it's like a bit like a dream come true. Don't worry, I'm not going to start gushing. But, as a planning committee and as a council, we've got a company that is obviously ticking every box on corporate social responsibility, whatever you want to call it, the way they're working with the community. More importantly, when it comes to planning, we always say we have to listen to the community. And on this occasion, the community is shouting loud. And I think that it's a responsibility of all of us to actually listen to that. And I applaud every single one. And I was so impressed that this company has given an opportunity to somebody as a training shop blaster that many other companies would not get that opportunity. So well done to that company. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stapleton. Do we have any other comments, questions? Wonderful. Is there a proposal to grant minerals planning permission? Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Stapleton, seconded by Councillor Hogarth. Show of hands of those in favour. That's unanimous, so that is passed. Thank you for that. Okay, thank you everybody. Application number 4 is planning application 22-02392/FUL, which is the erection of a sales office building and associated works. This is change of use of land to a caravan storage and sales at vacant land east of Adwick Lane, Tollbar in Doncaster. Nicola Howarth is the planning case officer that will introduce the item.
Thanks, Chair. Right, this is a planning application. It's a full planning application for the erection of a sales office building. It's a change of use of the land to caravan storage and sales. The development is to accommodate the expansion of the current business, which is Adwick Caravans, and they're based at Tollbar Garage, which is Asken Road, Tollbar. The application proposes to use the existing Tollbar Garage site for motorhome sales and repair service work, while the new site will be for touring caravans, sales and storage. The proposal is not for the storage of caravans belonging to the general public. The scheme includes a sales and office building together with customer parking and the creation of a new access road off Adwick Lane. That's just the aerial photograph. The site is currently a vegetated paddock. It's got some screening on mainly the frontage and the western boundary. There's mature hedgerow on the western boundary and also on the front. On the eastern boundary, there's very limited screening, but as you can see, there's the rear back gardens of homes along Markham Road and the side garden of number 18 Adwick Lane. There's also a new residential housing estate. It's not shown on there, but where that road is, that's basically that's been built out, and that's new housing. In terms of the local plan allocation, part of the site forms the southern edge of a larger site. It's nearly 50 hectares, and it's allocated as a potential employment development site, and it's called Carcroft Common within the adopted local plan. The development of this strategic site is linked to potential road improvements from the A1M and the A19, and the local plan advises that it will require a mixture of public and private sector investment to improve the accessibility of the site, and also there'll be flood risk mitigation required. Development of this site will be additional to the allocations capacity. Applications for employment uses will be approved on the strategic site where the flood risk sequential test and any other developer requirements are met. As you can see, in terms of the principle of development, the proposal is for the storage and sales of caravans on part of the larger allocated employment site. So consideration needs to be given as to whether this is an appropriate use in this location, and also whether accepting such a use would prejudice the longer-term development of the larger strategic employment allocation. The proposed use would not be considered to be a traditional employment development use. Instead, it's a specialist retail use, which is supported in principle on existing local employment sites. Following the submission of further information at the request of the local plans policy officer, the evidence provided in the sequential assessment of alternative sites satisfactorily demonstrates that there are very limited and sequentially preferable and suitable available sites located in the northwest of the borough. In terms of defining the search area, the applicant has put forward a business case based on logistics in terms of being within close proximity of their existing business premises, and we've accepted that it's practical that that the sites are in fairly close proximity, so staff can go to and from each different site. In terms of scale and visual and residential impact, whilst the development will be relatively close proximity to houses on Martin Road and Adwick Lane, the built development will comprise one single one-storey building with the associated parking area, so it's relatively low level, and it won't really cause any issues in terms of overlooking or overshadowing. Whilst the view will change from that of a rural paddock to a developed site, storing and selling touring caravans, the level of activity associated with the caravan sales use is comparable to an employment-related use, potentially less so. The retention of the existing site boundary hedges and the additional landscaping being proposed will help the development integrate more effectively. The Environmental Health Officer have not objected and advised conditions to control the business hours and hours of work during construction. Overall, it's not considered to cause significant harm or visual or residential amenity. This is the layout and the habitat area plan. In the development, the existing trees and hedges sited on the boundaries, mainly the western and the front boundary, will be retained, apart from a 10-metre section at the front, which provides for the access. The scheme also proposes 50 new trees along the site boundaries with 150 metres of newly planted hedgerow, and there'll also be permeable paving with crushed stone surface across the site, with an impermeable access way and obviously parking close to the building. The proposed new planting, once established, will provide better visual screening of the site for residents who live on Martin Road and Adwick Lane. This is just the access. Highway officers have assessed the proposal against the required standards and concluded there would be no adverse impacts from a highway safety perspective. Off-site highway works are required and will form part of the Section 278 agreement planning condition, and that includes the extension of the existing footway on the northern side of Adwick Lane, and there'll also be drop curbs and tactile paving will be provided on both sides of Adwick Lane within the vicinity of the site. They have submitted a transport assessment which indicates that there'll be minimal 36 two-way vehicle trips per day, which is 18 in and 18 out. So the development is significantly below indicative thresholds for detailed assessment, so it's not considered to generate a significant amount of traffic. Flood risk and drainage. The site is within flood zone 3A. The flood risk assessment confirms that there is a risk of flooding due to overtopping and breach of defences at the proposed development site. However, the proposal is a low vulnerability use for building and storage. Finished floor levels of the sales office will be set no lower than 5 metres AOD. A drainage strategy has been submitted by the applicant and it's been agreed in principle with the council's flood risk engineer and the Yorkshire and Humber Drainage Board. This follows the drainage hierarchy in that surface water will be pumped and discharged into the nearby local watercourse adjacent to Adwick Lane. Also proposed is the use of suds in order to reduce the surface water runoff. The majority of the pavement surfaces will be permeable material with crushed stone on top, and there'll also be a swale at the side. A separate land drainage consent will be required. Overall, there are no objections from technical consultees, including the EA. There have been concerns from residents about the potential of the site to cause surface water flooding, and I think subject to conditions in the implementation of the proposed drainage strategy, then it should satisfy any concerns. There's just some photographs. That's the eastern boundary. That's the western boundary with the mature hedge line. That's just the frontage along Adwick Lane, the hedgerow trees. And that's the rear boundary. As you can see, there's a palisade fence that goes across. And they're the immediate neighbours. They're the rear back gardens of properties along Martin Road and 18 Adwick Lane.
Thank you for that, Nicola. We've got Councillor James Church, who is the ward member, was requested to speak in opposition to the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. So when you're ready to press the large red button, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Chair, thank you. The residents of Martin Road would like to formally object to the proposed development of the paddock to the rear of their houses. A change of use to caravan storage is inappropriate for this area of land. For over 30 years, the paddock running along and directly behind our properties has always been used for grazing horses. We were always assured that this paddock would not be developed, and indeed this outlook was the main reason for us moving here. This is a residential area, and the impact of this commercial development, situated only feet from our back doors, would be devastating. Our worries are centred around the following issues. Privacy. Our living rooms face directly over the paddock, which means that our outlook would be obscured and changed from open fields to rows of caravans and an office building. Therefore, our privacy would be compromised by people using this site. Why is the only building placed so close to the resident's property? Regarding the distance between the proposed building, it is less than 6 metres than is implied within the application. It is more like 6 feet from the deeds of some of the residents' property. Noise pollution. This is a residential area and the proposed development is feet away from residents' properties. The application for a workshop implies that there will be ongoing work throughout the day, weekdays and weekends, which will directly impact on the health and well-being of residents, many of whom are retired or who work from home. Having a working business and workshop with all the associated noise is not conducive to a residential area. Other businesses are situated well away from residential areas, such as on Bentley Moor Lane, where noise, even from there, can sometimes be heard. Crime. It is well documented that caravan theft has increased, and we have concerns that the storage of caravans would invite crime and have a direct impact on residents in the area. Flood risk. As the planning information is so limited, we have no idea as to how the flood risk will be addressed. The floods in 2007 overwhelmed the surrounding fields, and many residents have recalled the devastating impact on the surrounding area. We are particularly concerned that this site will have higher risk of flooding. Wildlife. Presumably the fields will be flattened and the trees will be destroyed, many of which have been there for many years. So this would significantly impact on local wildlife, particularly the resident bat population. And what would proposed would go against the local PAM policies 43 and 48. Pollution. We understand that soil in this area is polluted and would require the buildings to be elevated. This would further impact on privacy. Road safety. Residents have concerns about risk to safety. The traffic runs down Adwick Lane well in excess of the speed limits, resulting in regular accidents along the lane, and there are fears that this risk would increase with creating new access. It would also require change to signage with regards to the national speed limit. The access from the site would be close to the current access to Martin Road, which is already difficult due to the lack of visibility created by the current development further along, Adwick Lane obscuring the road of the bend. The destruction of this paddock into a workshop and a storage facility, sitting only feet away, I'm nearly done, sitting only feet away from our backyards, when there is so much other land available that is not in a residential area, would be particularly unfair. This is a plea from us not to reduce our standard of living and well-being by allowing this development to go ahead. Yours sincerely, Martin Road residents.
Thank you for that, Councillor Church. Do any of the members of the committee have any questions? No? Okay, thank you for that. We've now got Mrs. Angela Simmons. We have Mrs. Angela Simmons, who is the agent that has requested to speak in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you've concluded, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you for your time today. I'd like to start by offering my thanks to the case officer who has proactively worked with us on this proposal. A number of detailed reports were requested by the case officer and duly provided, the result of which is a very detailed submission before you today with the case officer's positive recommendation. This is largely due to all previous statutory consultee objections now being fully addressed and satisfied. The site is required to support and extend the applicant's current caravan sales business, which is located a very short distance from the site. The site, therefore, is not only functionally and economically preferable, but also a sustainable option which reduces the need for lengthy journey and stock transfers between the sites. The site is immediately adjacent to the development boundary of Talbar and set within a potential employment development site allocated by the council itself. This land allocation is large, and although piecemeal development is not always the first option, it is considered that this offers an ideal opportunity to allow the first steps in these developments to a local and successful businessman. The development in this relatively small boundary section is not considered to hinder or prejudice the future development of the larger site. I would in fact hopefully highlight and encourage the potential of this larger employment site in the future. The applicant lives locally and has successfully grown Adwick Caravans from a small enterprise to a successful caravan business, which he now needs to grow and expand. In order to maintain the financial viability of the business and to maintain the applicant's key ethos of investing and supporting the local economy where he lives, the expansion needs to be local. Doncaster Council has consistently demonstrated that supporting local businesses and the economic growth of the borough is key in both local plan policy and decisions made by the committee itself. Business Doncaster have made positive comments in their officer's report and supports this application. The concerns raised by some local residents are understandable, as this is currently a site which is largely undeveloped. However, the site already forms part of a larger potential land allocation by the council, and in terms of possible commercial ventures which could be seen on the site, and indeed the larger site, this development is very low key, resulting in very low impacts. The case officer has ensured that any amenity impacts are heavily mitigated through screening, landscaping and biodiversity improvements, which the applicant would seek to implement to fully accordance with the permission. The applicant is also a local man with strong local ties who has made this area the centre of his business and indeed his home. It's in his very best interest to ensure that this site is well managed, secure and respectful to local residents. The low-key site may also act as a buffer to the nearest residents from potentially more disruptive, larger scale commercial developments on the larger extent of the land allocation. The proposal has also generated 10 local comments in support, which the applicant has found very encouraging. A full and detailed flood risk assessment has been submitted for consideration. It is considered that the development proposal has effectively dealt with the issue of flood risk. Sequentially preferable options have been fully appraised, and there are none which offer a better option which is comparable or more commercially beneficial than this one. I'm not going to sort of detail the planning policy position here, as your case officer has provided a very detailed report which assesses the merits of both local and national policy requirements. We would, however, endorse the case officer's positive recommendation and would ask the committee to apply the same weight to the benefits of this proposal, which, with mitigation, outweighs any perceived harm. Just to address some of the objections raised, we'd like to confirm there is no workshop on the site. It is merely caravan sales from the site, so in terms of noise from a workshop, there will be none. The proposal occupies a sustainable location with excellent links to the wider highway network, which support a local successful business and will increase employment for this area. To conclude, we respectfully ask that the committee supports the local business and considers the positive planning balance reached by your case officer. I do also have the applicant here if there are any questions with regards to running the business in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do any of the committee have any questions to ask? Councillor Beach?
I've got a couple of questions, if you would bear with me. Thank you, Chair. First of all, Adwick Caravan Sales, do they have a franchise for any particular model, or are they just second-hand trade-in vehicle vans?
I'll have to seek clarification from the applicant for that, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, allow that.
So just asking if it's a franchise or whether it's general caravan sales.
So for touring caravans, we only sell used and nearly new, but non-new. But at our motorhome proposed site, we will be selling brand new motorhomes.
I see, thank you. But the motorhomes will be at the current site, I take it? Yeah.
They will be at the current site, yes.
And the other question is, on this site, this proposed site, was there any intention of putting an accessory shop? Because that is what would encourage a lot of coming and going with vehicles.
Oh, you mean sort of parts and parts for holidays, caravans, sort of the water carriers?
All the things, the gas and all that sort of thing, you know.
Can we stick to what the actual application is, because what there might be down the line or whatever is not relevant. We've got to discuss what's actually on this application form before us, please.
Yeah.
Just
what I wanted to know was where it says change caravan and sales, caravan use and sales, but it's associated works. I mean, it's been clarified that there will be no service department, but I know from previous occupation that
we give accessories away.
An accessory shop in actual fact creates a lot of coming and going.
Chair, we can confirm it's just the units, they're not accessories to be sold to the general public as such.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Do we have any other questions that we would like to ask? No? Okay, thank you for that. I'm now going to ask committee members if they would like to go into debate and have any comment to ask the planning case officer. Councillor Stapleton and then Councillor Hogarth.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I do understand why this application is in front of us, it seems fairly straightforward. The planning officer has done her job really well here, covered off all concerns. And I'm just looking at, you know, toll bar. I mean, I remember toll bar when a certain person had a scrapyard there, and the mess of toll bar that made. We've now got an opportunity where a local businessman is looking to expand his business in an area where not many people want to go because of the historic issues around toll bar. And I think we should be doing everything to encourage businesses, especially when it's in this particular area, to be expanding their business and creating employment in toll bar. Because if we don't, because you're not going to build any, I'd be surprised if you ever get houses built there because of that flood risk. If you don't, give it another 10, 15 years, toll bar will have, it'll be void. There'll be tumbleweed going down the road, and then people will be complaining. So I applaud anybody locally that's looking to expand their business. And I think what the case officer's done, Nicola's done with this, is really, really good. And I'm quite impressed with, which, in essence, you know, it's a small bloody field, a little paddock, you know, and they're putting some hardcore and a bit of drainage down to put some caravans on there. And I get frustrated with this one because it's why is it even here in front of us? Because to me, and I get why, because of all these issues, but it's a straightforward planning application for something that should be fairly straightforward, and I fully support this, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stapleton. Councillor Hogarth.
Yeah, the concern I've got is regarding to just where the entrance to the site is, there's a national speed limit sign. And will that be moved? So you're going to have the national speed limit going across the entrance, which seems a bit, traffic-wise, a bit dangerous.
I don't think that the sign will require moving, but I think Andy's probably better.
So just because there's a national speed limit sign saying 60 mile an hour doesn't mean to say cars are going to do 60 miles an hour. So on the other side, there's a 30 mile an hour sign. So approach speeds from Adwick will be, I would hope, approaching 30 miles an hour. I can't cater for certain drivers, but you drive to the conditions of the road and signage of the road. So just because there's a speed limit sign saying 60 miles an hour is not any cause for concern in terms of the entrance, because I would say unless we're doing Star Trek Warp Factor 6, it's basically impossible to be at 60 miles an hour next to the entrance. So whilst, yeah, I take your point, you've got to case by case look at where the site access is, and it's as close to the 30 mile an hour as you could ever get without being on top of it. So I have no cause for concerns in terms of the access being within a 60 mile an hour speed limit. So access and visibility displays have been assessed, which are also very good in terms of the 60 mile an hour side. So in terms of the access itself and its location, I have no cause for concern.
Can you just put the picture up where you had the sign? Because me, if that's a speed limit, that people are allowed to go to that speed. And I can't see, you know, moving the speed limit further along there. And that's going to be where entrance is.
The entrance is just to the left of that. So it is about 15 metres away from that speed limit sign. So it's like I say, it is absolutely impossible.
Just pass them out, yeah. Well, I think it's a bit nearer to houses. But if you're saying the national speed limit applies from them, I've never known it. It's too close to that entrance. I think it should be moved further away to the other side of the entrance.
The junction's been assessed at 60 miles an hour, so there is no issues with the junction being within a 60 mile an hour national speed limit. Visibility displays to the northeast, as you're looking at that plan, northwest, sorry, as you're looking at that plan, towards the wording access, yeah, are in excess of what is needed, which is approximately 160 metres. So in terms of visibility out of that junction, it's acceptable. So your visibility to the left back into toll bar are also acceptable because it's as close to the 30 mile an hour as you can get, and it's impossible for cars, vehicles or anything, unless it's Star Trek, that you can get to 60 miles an hour. So I don't see what else I can say to try and say to you it's impossible to do 60 miles an hour next to that junction. So we assess it on the reasonable speed that should be going past that junction.
And again, you've got very slow moving vehicles, large vehicles going in and out of that site slowly. So I do think there's a problem.
Okay, I've got Councillor Stapleton, then I've got Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to follow up on that. Mr Wiltshire, in your experience, do most vehicles on our roads have brakes?
Last time I understood, yeah, brakes were on most vehicles.
Can I just say we've got a councillor that's raised a real concern to him, so I don't think we should be making light of that. So, you
I'm
know,
not making light of it, Chair.
I just think that just sounds a bit derogatory. So can we just make sure that, you know, we are respectful of other people's views and any concerns that they may raise.
Thank you, Chair. I think from what we've heard, as Chair just said, we've had a concern raised. That's a local knowledge concern. However, what you've also heard from the highways officer is this has been technically assessed at the speed that vehicles will be travelling, and it comes out on that evidential basis that it is acceptable for an access in that location. So I just need to remind members that the test in the National Planning Policy Framework is there's got to be robust evidence of the potential of serious highways impact or harm, and that is not what is before you in the report.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, I wasn't making any derogatory comments. Basically, what I'm trying to get at here is that most vehicles do have brakes, and I was asking Andy, most people that the vehicles do. The caravans are usually quite large inside, especially if they're coming on a transporter, and I'd agree with what you're saying. I mean, you know, unless you do have a Star Trek type vehicle, when you turn onto that road, you can't accelerate to hit 60 mile an hour or 77 mile an hour and go back in time, whatever. You can't do it. That's a very short drop. So I don't see there's any issue with that 60 mile an hour thing there, because I mean, I go regularly down there. You couldn't hit 60 mile an hour if you tried. And like he just said, you've got clear visibility. If there was a slow-moving vehicle, caravan turning in or out of it, you would be able to brake and stop well in time. So, you know, I'm just supporting what Andy was saying.
Councillor Cox.
I just want to put my hand up as a caravan user and just point out that Bawtry Caravans on Bawtry Road is onto a 60 mile an hour road. And I've come in and out of there, and both car and caravan have generally been intact. Well, my driving's a bit poor, but other than that, I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? No? Therefore, is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to the conditions? That's been moved. Is that seconded? We have a show of hands of those in favour. Those against? And abstentions? 1 abstentions. Okay, therefore that is passed. Thank you for that. Okay, we've got item 6, which is the consideration of a Section 106 agreement following a viability assessment for residential development at Austin Road, Carcroft, and that is 19/01514/OUTM, and Andrea Sudes is the Senior Planning Officer, which will introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't an application as such, it's an applicant seeking to vary the Section 106 legal agreement for a development of residential housing at Austin Road at Carcroft. So as background to this request, outline planning permission was granted under delegated authority in December 2019, with the decision being subject to a Section 106 agreement. The agreement sought to deliver obligations which included delivery of 26% affordable housing as built units on site, a commuted sum of £201,267, which is index linked to provide 11 secondary school places at Outward Academy, and 15% on-site public open space. You've got the original officer delegation report. It's attached as Appendix 1, along with a copy of the Section 106 agreement as Appendix 2. So this slide shows the site's location in Carcroft. It's near the junction between Asken Road and Carcroft Road. This is the aerial view of the site. It's currently very overgrown, scrubland, subject to fly tipping. I think you can see around the middle of the site, that's where all the fly tipping's taken place. And then this is site photographs taken November last year. You can see that the site is very overgrown. You can see that there's plenty of fly tipping been going on, compared to the site photos in July 2019 for the outline application. So it's become much more subject to fly tipping and even more overgrown. So since the 2019 planning permission, the site's been sold on and the current owner has submitted a reserve matters application. So this application is seeking approval of the details of appearance, landscaping, layout and scale for the erection of 63 dwellings. So the application originally proposed 73 dwellings, but this has since been reduced in order to overcome highway and design related issues. So this slide shows the current proposal that's under consideration for the reserve matters. So the applicant also submitted a deed of variation accompanied by a full viability appraisal concurrently with the submission of the reserve matters application. So since submission of the viability appraisal, this has also been updated to reflect the current number of dwellings proposed, and that's attached as Appendix 3 of the report. So in consideration of viability, Local Plan Policy 66 allows for the impact of viability on developments to be taken into account, and it states that the Council will take a pragmatic and flexible approach to planning obligations on an independent case-by-case basis and subject to meeting 3 criteria. The first of those 3 is a robust and fit-for-purpose viability appraisal that shows the full contribution would make the development unviable. Secondly, possibility of reduced, deferred or phased contributions have been fully explored. And 3, it can be demonstrated that the wider benefits of the scheme outweigh its low level of contributions. The viability has been assessed by the Council's independent external consultant. The consultant has appraised the scheme using the nationally accepted profit level of 17.5% on gross development value, which is taken to represent a reasonable return for a development such as this. It's advised in planning practice guidance, and it's been widely accepted at appeal that schemes should make between 15 and 20% profit on sales, that's gross development value. The conclusion of the assessment shows that the scheme, with the policy compliant amount of affordable housing and education contributions, would make this scheme unviable. So the variation to the Section 106 agreement would remove the requirement to deliver affordable housing and the requirement to provide 11 secondary school places at Outward Academy, which is a financial contribution of £201,267. So what are the benefits of this scheme? It would bring back into use a currently overgrown brownfield site, that's subject to frequent fly tipping, as shown in the site photographs. It would provide much needed new housing with a range of predominantly 1, 2 and 3 bedroom properties in an area where the nearest allocated housing site is located at Skello, so no other provision more locally. This means we would be reliant on windfall sites such as this for provision of new housing in this area. So the officer recommendation is to agree a deed of variation to vary the terms of the Section 106 agreement, to remove the requirement to provide affordable housing, and to remove the requirement for a commuted sum in lieu of education. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Andrew. I'm going to fetch Stacey now just to put a clear explanation for what you're discussing today.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to elaborate on the advice I gave in the report about how you go about reaching your decision in this type of application. So this is an application to modify a Section 106 agreement, and the age of the obligation is relevant because there are two routes, if you like, by which a developer can do it. You can either do it within the first 5 years of the obligation being entered into, which is the case we're in here, in which case it's a discretionary decision for you guys and it's up to the LPA whether they agree or disagree with it. If it's past 5 years, then the applicant can put in a Section 106A application, and then that's got a statutory determination period and a right of appeal. So you're in the realms of it's down to your discretion as to whether you agree to it or not. So appeals don't apply, but the decision you make is potentially open to challenge in accordance with the usual public law principles. So the question really for members in considering whether to agree to the modifications in this report is to decide whether the obligation continues to serve a useful purpose such that it should be maintained. So the usual planning merits do not necessarily come into it. It's more what does the obligation, what function does the obligation perform, and should it be maintained in the public interest? That's more the question you need to be thinking about when reaching your decision on this report. I just wanted to give a bit of guidance on that, but I'm happy to elaborate if there's any questions.
Thank you for that, Stacey. Okay. Therefore, does any member wish to speak on this? Councillor Cox.
Thank you. I'm pleased really that this has come in, but what question I have, and I think you've probably heard it before, Stacey, is that we've been following a 106 for a number of years, which has ended up that we've lost a full school, not 11 places. And that hasn't been the choice of any committee. That decision has been made, or, well, it's time lapsed, but the 106 hasn't been watched over. But again, I raise it again, we have lost a school, not 11 places. So I'm happy that this is here, because if it hadn't and ended up in the same place, we'd have got to the end with the applicant coming in and saying, well, we can't afford to do it now. Or it's just not been watched and it's gone time over time. So we've lost it anyway. But I'm happy it's here. I'm happy we can actually consider it instead of losing even more. So it's more a comment than anything else, but we don't want to lose any more schools. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else that wishes to raise? Councillor Stapleton.
Just a quick question, Chair. Obviously, this is not our norm. I just want to sort of get the understanding. If we don't agree to this, the alternative is, for what I'm understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this development will not go ahead because it's not financially viable. Is that accurate? So that really is the main choice. Do we want that development to go ahead?
That is exactly the decision before the committee.
Councillor Anderson.
What will the impact on schools be without the places that were paid for? Can they cope with the extra people?
We're not able to answer that specifically. However, at the time the application was granted, there was demonstrated from the education team that there was a need for financial provision as I recall, it wasn't for primary school places, it was just for secondary school places, and that was 11 school places. So the impact would be that if this goes along with the officer recommendation, there would be a financial hit in terms of creating that provision within the schools to accommodate those 11 places. Doesn't mean the 11 children or whatever will not be educated, but it'll put additional pressure on them.
And who bears that pressure? Is it the councils, the education authority? Is it the academy? Is it the Department of Education?
I'm not quite sure. I think it would be the education authority, but not quite sure. But in terms of this number, this figure, this was from 2019. So that number could have changed. It could have gone up or it could have gone down. So it's not a set number that, you know, we're saying is definitely the case now.
Well, Councillor Potts.
Does this have to be decided today? Because what I'm going to suggest is that we defer this and get somebody from education to come and say, you know, explain what alternatives or what implication there is for education. I just think that would be a reasonable way forward.
Councillor Potts, we're approaching that we've been here 3 hours. Are we happy to move that we go past the 3-hour limit to conclude this business for today? Is that all agreed?
You agree.
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting. Carry on.
I've finished. Thank you.
I mean, I think that's an extremely sensible approach flowing out from the concerns that Councillor Anderson's mentioned, as confirmed by you. We'd be happy to get somebody from the education team here next time.
Therefore, the proposal is that we defer this to the next meeting to further discuss and address the issues that have been raised. Yes. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, therefore, item 7, which is appeal decisions, it's for information only. Does any member wish to speak on this item? Well, we've got 6 minutes now, and we haven't had to move it. Okay, so can I ask, can we move that be noted? Noted. Okay, members, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business at today's meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and input. I now declare the meeting closed, but please stay in your seats for a couple more minutes.
Members, before we finish, can I just mention that this is my last committee for a few months because I'm going off to have a baby. So, yeah, you may have noticed I'm expanding. Yeah, yeah. Well, there is a bit of maybe a bit of too much cake involved, but